Okay, it's 9 o'clock, the 16th of October. We'll call the county work session to order. The Stormwater Capital Plan. It looks like all counselors are present, online or in person. And Jeff Schnabel and Devin Restifer, take it away.
All right. Good morning. Is this coming through? Yep. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Council. Jeff Schnabel for the record, Stormwater Infrastructure Manager with the Clean Water Division in Public Works. Thank you for joining us this morning to chat a little bit about the 2025 to 30 Stormwater Capital Plan and Program Update. Next, please. So just a quick reminder, no action required from Council today on this information. It is simply for informational purposes. We will visit with you again in another week or two for adoption of the plan. So the goals today are we're just going to do an overview of the 25 to 30 Stormwater Capital Plan and Program. And our agenda will be to do a real quick review of permit issues, county policies and regulatory requirements. I'll recap a little bit of our work plan from 2024, and then we'll look at several elements of the 25 to 30 plan, followed by a quick look ahead to our work plan for specifically 2025 and our remaining public outreach schedule for the plan. Next, please. So I believe everyone's pretty familiar with the Phase 1 municipal stormwater permit. We've had lots of chance to talk about these types of requirements with you all this year. But just as a quick recap, state and federal law kind of governs what we do in the Clean Water Program, Clean Water Division. We've got the Federal Clean Water Act from the EPA, delegating authority to Ecology in the state of Washington to administer the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System municipal stormwater permits. And that regulates discharges of waters to waters of the state. And as you know, it's updated every 5 years. Most recently, our new permit kicked in August of 2024, and it will run through July of 29. Permit compliance for the county, led by the Clean Water Division, and we are supported, of course, by multiple divisions and departments throughout the county to deal with numerous requirements and criteria. And of course, compliance is our primary goal. Public health, water body health, quality of life issues are at stake, as well as potentially some fines and third-party lawsuits if we got into compliance issues. So, there's a bunch of different components and requirements involved with our stormwater plan, stormwater management plan and permit. But today you'll see the bolded items of stormwater capital projects and facility maintenance that are germane to the capital plan. So we will focus there today. Next, please. So locally, our primary policy and goals, as mentioned, our policy goal is to meet the Phase 1 municipal stormwater permit requirements. Along the way, we want to be protecting and enhancing streams and wetlands, minimizing our stormwater impacts to all of our receding waters, and maximizing our benefits from public lands. The specific requirements that pertain to capital planning from the municipal stormwater permit, we have a stormwater management for existing development requirement, which is to prevent or reduce impacts to waters of the state. If you're noticing a slight change in the nomenclature there, this is what used to be known as the Structural Stormwater Controls Program. The most recent permit changed that definition slightly to be stormwater management for existing development. We also are required to do some stormwater management planning, as well as, of course, a lot of maintenance and operations work, some of which lands on the capital plan, as you know. And then secondarily, the other regulatory requirement is our underground injection control program at the state. So the county is required to address dry wells, which of course are the perforated manholes used to inject treated stormwater back into the groundwater in some areas. So any of those that pose a threat to groundwater, we are required to include those and deal with them through our capital work. Next, please. So moving into a quick summary for the current year, just to let you know what we've been up to. We had just one project in post-construction establishment. We're in our second year, our first year actually, of post-planting care for our Schreiber reforestation project. That's a 13-acre reforestation out on the East Fork Lewis River floodplain. And then construction phase, we had 7 projects going on this year, the largest being the picture on the upper right along 78th Street at Northeast 13th and 16th Avenues. Oh, a little bit up. There we go. Technical adjustment. Is that better? Okay. Yeah, so that picture there is some of the guys installing a cartridge filter vault there along 78th Street for water quality treatment. And then we are actually right in the middle of planting a reforestation project out at the Salmon Creek Greenway, right about where Cougar Creek joins Salmon Creek. So that the seeding, I think, was done 2 days ago, and we'll be doing some planting out there over the next week of container stock and other things. The rest of our projects were repair projects this year, so there's a few listed there. I will point out the ones at the bottom there, Wilding, Myers, and Lindemann with the asterisk. Those projects are not yet constructed. We are waiting on delivery for the structures that we intend to install for those repair projects, and we are still hopeful that they will arrive in time to construct those projects this year. If by chance they do not, then these will be rolled over into early 2025, and those will be the first things that we do kind of out the gate in the spring. We're always looking ahead to what the next projects are going to be. So we did have 9 projects this year that are in various stages of design. And of course, our ongoing planning activities, including our reforestation planning, some test plots that we're working on out at Salmon Creek Greenway to improve our planting success, and they're looking really good. We also got back into our sub-basin retrofit planning a little bit this year, and so we did finish a retrofit planning effort on Lalonde Creek, which is another of those lower Salmon Creek tributaries. And our budget this year was about $1.6 million. Next, please. So turning to the 2025 to 30 matrix and our priorities. So as always, our required priorities, required capital repair projects are always a priority. So you'll see a lot of that in this plan again. And then water quality treatment in our lower Salmon Creek tributaries, we've added the Lalonde tributary. So we do have active projects and have looked for good projects within 5 now of those lower Salmon Creek tributaries. We'll continue reforesting county lands, and then of course property acquisition when we have the opportunity with legacy lands for stormwater benefit. Things you'll notice about the matrix. So the budget and schedule adjustments are in there since our last adoption in November of 2023, which was for the 2024 to 29 plan that we're currently under. You'll notice a couple new projects from the Lalonde sub-basin retrofit study that I just mentioned. So we're happy to find some high priority projects in that basin so we can continue to spread out our efforts. And then the last 2 items, you'll notice there are 8 required repairs that we've included, as well as some ramping up into the major repairs of detention ponds and aged out treatment facilities towards the end of the 6-year plan. And I've got those starred. Those are pending discussions on the stormwater rate adoption and decisions made by council along those lines. So they are in the plan at the moment, but I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, please. Pardon me. So you will notice the proposed matrix includes some capital projects that are rate study dependent. What we've done is we've included the projects that are in the mandated category only, and that will account for what you see as an increase in the plan expenses from our existing plan in 24 to 29, which was about $13.5 million. There's about $4.3 million of additional dollars contemplated there for those repair projects. But one thing I wanted to make sure is obvious is that the 2025 work programmed in this proposed plan does not include any of those rate study dependent projects, with one exception. We do have $50,000 allocated in 2025 to begin designing a repair for the Philbrook Farms subdivision, since we think that's going to take a little bit of effort and we wanted to jump on that as soon as possible. So what that means is that council should be able to move forward with adopting this plan prior to making final decisions about the rate study and what types of projects will and will not be included going forward. We won't be expending any effort other than that little bit of Philbrook money in 2025. So future modifications can be made next year for the 26 to 2031 capital plan, and those will be based on final council direction coming out regarding rates and service levels that you all would like to see. So I hope that makes sense. Certainly willing to come back to that later if there are questions. Next, please. So looking again now at the matrix for 2025 to 30, there are 32 projects in the matrix right now as far as new projects, and we're just shy of $18 million estimated cost for that 6-year total. And if you take a look at the pie chart there real quick of the project types, we do a lot of water quality treatment projects and a lot of capital repair projects. Those are the two, the lion's share of kind of the pie there. And again, in the capital repair, you'll see there are 10 projects listed there, and that is reflecting the addition of some of those mandatory level projects from the ongoing rate study mandatory section. The hydrology project over there, we only have one, but that is our large project out at the Heritage Farm, the wetlands restoration project scheduled for 2025 construction. So most of those dollars that are allocated there are just that project and some planning for a few others coming up in the future. Next, please. So as far as funding, real quick, 25 to 2030, we're going to have a little bit more expanded sources of revenue than we're used to seeing for clean water. So normally we are simply funded by the Clean Water Fund and grant revenue. But this coming 6-year cycle now, we will expand to include a couple of other revenue sources. And Clean Water Fund will be contributing about $5.5 million to this total. And now for the first time this next year, we'll start utilizing in clean water some real estate excise tax 2 or REIT 2 funding that we have never done in the past. So that's a new revenue source that we're happy to have. And we're looking at about $7.5 million of contribution from that fund over the 6-year period. We assume about $1.5 million of grants. And then I think everyone's familiar with, we do have an offer of a $3.4 million loan from the Department of Ecology for the Heritage Farm project. That loan would be a 20-year loan at 0.4% interest. That has not been formalized yet. Ecology has offered the loan, but they have not yet reached out to begin negotiating that loan agreement. When they do, of course, we will be back to council to chat about that and get your approval to move forward with that loan if you desire. And then on the right-hand side, I did not update this graphic for this year. We had pretty limited grant dollars spent this year, but what you're seeing there is just an example over the course of the last, since 2011 up until 2023, just to show that about 28% of our revenues for capital projects specifically have come from state grants or provisos. So we're proud of that, and we want to hopefully kind of continue that or even improve it going forward. Next, please. So a quick look ahead now for 2025 specifically. We will have 5 projects in the construction phase. One of those, as I've mentioned before, is kind of our big project, the Heritage Farm wetland restoration, and the figure at the bottom of the slide is a picture of the layout of those wetland cells and how they will be positioned there at the farm. And the next 3 projects, we have 3 water quality projects kind of in the Highway 99 and 99th Street area. So this is the lower Salmon Creek tributaries, Tenney Creek, Suds Creek, Cougar Creek area. Very heavily trafficked, very heavily developed. These are kind of some of our bread and butter projects that we've been doing the last number of years. These are where we're doing kind of linear road projects where we are replacing or installing catch basins that were installed with no treatment, and there's basically no treatment for any of these road surfaces. And this is where we're putting in some cartridges that have phosphorus removal technologies since they are, I think we're getting some feedback. I'll hold for a second. There we go. Yep. Yeah. So so these are where we're trying to start installing some phosphorus removal technologies. These are directly feeding into Lower Salmon Creek, which of course is connected to Lake River and Vancouver Lake on down the line. And we have a new reforestation project at our Schreiber property up on the East Fork, up on the northwest corner. That'll be another 6 acres of forest reforestation happening next year. Our post-construction will just continue establishing those plantings on the previous Schreiber planting. We'll have 8 projects in design next year, and our overall budget quite a bit higher, 5.4 million, driven largely by the larger Heritage Farm Wetland project. Next, please. So continuing to look ahead for 2025 in the planning, we're going to be evaluating impacts from the final 2024 municipal stormwater permit that I mentioned came out in August. There were some changes made by Ecology between the draft and final permit issuance. What they ended up doing is increasing the number of points that we need to earn to meet that stormwater management for existing development capital requirement. But they have also expanded the timeline to include January of 2023 all the way out to December of 2027 to get those points accumulated. And those will come both from constructed and completed projects and also from projects that we take to at least a 60% design level. So they've made some changes to the point calculations and how credits are calculated for sweeping work. So as we get into early 2025, we will be taking a hard look again at our capital plan and calculating out all of those project points to make sure that we are in good shape to meet those requirements. And of course, if we find any issues, we'll revisit that and make changes as needed in future capital plans. We're going to continue sub-basin retrofit planning. We're looking to support lake and watershed plan implementation, both for Vancouver Lake and Lacamas, hopefully getting to do some more lower Salmon Creek or lake shore work for retrofit planning. We'll continue reforestation program planning, looking for the next projects down the line. And then another couple with asterisks at the bottom. These are both pending kind of the stormwater rate discussions again, but we would, if desired, move into some asset management, capital repair replacement type work and planning, as well as resuming some earlier efforts and continuing on the path to a 20-year long-term capital plan. Next, please. And finally, public outreach and adoption schedules. So I had a chance to chat with the Clean Water Commission last Wednesday on October 9th about the capital plan. Of course, today's work session is also coincident with our State Environmental Policy Act comment period starting today. So that'll run from the 16th to the 31st. So we should have that finalized prior to adoption. Next week on the 22nd, we're holding a public open house to discuss the plan with residents. And then we're planning to come back for adoption by council at the November 5th council meeting. And as you know, that adoption is typically done by resolution and often in the separate business category. There is no public hearing specifically associated with adopting the stormwater capital plan. And next, please. I think it's my last one. Just a quick plug for our Stormwater Capital Plan Open House. This will be 6 to 8 in the evening next Tuesday, October 22nd, up at Salmon Creek Elementary. We're excited to be able to hold an open house for our capital plan. This will be the first time that we've done so. So we're looking forward to hopefully getting a decent turnout from the folks in the public and get a chance to talk about kind of what we're doing, where we're going. And hopefully this will be the start of a kind of an annual effort to have an open house associated with the stormwater capital planning process. So looking forward to that. I think that is all I have for you this morning. So thank you very much and happy to answer questions or take comments.
I have just a couple of items for confirmation. If you would please. The first one is the 1.6 million that you talked about that is current year, that is already fully covered in budget, right?
That is correct, Councilor. Yep.
Okay. And then the second question is kind of the corollary to what comes in the future. With all of the capital plans that you have now, are they fully encapsulated into those mandatory projects that we will have covered by fees should those mandatory projects be adopted? Is that correct?
Pardon me.
In other words, there's no additional that is highlighted here, is there?
So I think I'm understanding where you're going, Counselor. So out of the 32 projects that are listed in the matrix for this 6-year capital plan, so 10 of those line items or projects are associated with decisions in the rate study. So, and they are in that mandatory category. The other 22 projects that we're currently working on and will be moving forward with, those are projects that were already contemplated prior to the rate study. Those are dealt with essentially by existing funding sources outside of the rate study issues. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
That got it. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Just wanted to be sure that we were not seeing an increase in funds being requested, and I think we are not.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah,
Yep.
very good.
And Counselor Belcott, it looks like Counselor Mevaji is having some audio issues. If you want to, sorry, Counselor
Yes.
Mevaji, if you want to continue for him.
Yes, I will do that until his audio comes back on. Is there any other questions from the council?
Yes, I have a couple of questions.
Right?
Thank you. Related to the grants that were part of the 1.5 that are anticipated, have we applied for those yet? Or will they get caught up in, or are they vulnerable to our compliance issue with GMA?
Yeah, great question, Counselor. Thank you. So the 1.5 million that I showed on the slides is an assumed amount of grant revenue from sources that we are currently eligible to receive. And so those are things like Centennial Clean Water Fund, basically anything outside of the Stormwater Financial Assistance Program monies that we typically, or that we often apply for from ecology. So the Stormwater Financial Assistance is the one that's sort of in play with GMA discussions, right? And we're not currently able to accept grant funding from that source. So that if we were to be in the future, that grant dollar amount that we're anticipating to fund the 6-year plan could increase. But that 1.5 is assumed from sources that we are currently eligible for.
Great,
Does that make
but
sense?
which leads
Yeah.
to my next question, because I wondered if we are not applying for sources that we're currently not eligible for.
Gotcha.
That would be a concern of mine.
Right. Yep, for sure. And I can actually answer that in an affirmative way as well. So yesterday was the deadline for ecology grant submittals for the Water Quality Combined Financial Assistance Program, which includes both the Stormwater Financial Assistance Program and the non-point source or centennial sources, right? So Clean Water submitted 4 grant proposals yesterday. 2 of those were for centennial funding, and 2 of the, oh, thank you so much. Yeah. 2 of those were for centennial funding, and 2 of those were for stormwater financial assistance. So we are going ahead and applying for all of those dollars, and then we will wait and see.
Great, thank you.
yeah.
I'm happy to hear that.
Okay.
And related on page 6, with those projects, some of which are funded and some will depend on whether or not there's an increase in the rates. And the picture in page 6 there, is that Philbrook Farm?
That is.
Okay,
Yeah,
thought so. And what month do you know what month that is?
I don't exactly, but typically we're seeing those events occur anywhere from November to March.
November to March,
Yeah.
okay. So if the rates are increased, and I'm happy to see that the design work is moving forward anyway, but if the rates were increased, actual activity implementation of whatever you design could take place next year?
No,
No.
the design will begin next year, and we'll be going out for a contract to have that design done, if not done internally. Excuse me. And That'll take a little while, right? There'll be some design work and typically at least a year to complete those types of projects. So we'll be looking at constructing, I think it's currently in the plan as a 2027 summer construction, but if we get lucky and move it forward quicker, we would move it into 2026 in the next plan. So,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, but so there wouldn't be any ground moving or anything like
No.
that next year, but
No.
the design work will move forward.
That's
So
correct.
that's great to hear. And I was curious, you mentioned the dry wells and groundwater monitoring. I was just curious how you do that groundwater monitoring to determine if there is some impact.
Yeah, yep. So the typical way that we determine, excuse me, well, I'll actually tell you what we did a few years ago. There was actually a requirement from the state to specifically inventory and inspect all of our dry well facilities, and the county owns about 1,600 of those. And so we were required to go out and take a look at those and evaluate with some criteria which ones might pose a threat to groundwater. And so the good news is that out of those 1,600, there were only about 40 within unincorporated Clark County that had some issues. Since 2015, we have been working to eliminate those, and we're down to just a handful remaining, I think 6 or 8 sites. And it's been long enough now that we're going to go back and reevaluate those before we take any more action, just to make sure that there's still an issue. But those will start showing up as we go forward. But the way we figured it out, the typical defect or issue that we find with dry wells, if we're going to, is that some of them have been completed a little deep. They're typically 13 feet deep. And there's a requirement that there's a separation between the bottom of the dry well and the groundwater elevation of at least 5 feet. And so we found some that we call them wet feet, right? So they were completed a little too deep, which means the groundwater intrudes right up into the dry well, and you're not getting that treatment through that 5 feet of existing soil profile below the dry well before it goes into the ground or into the water. So in those cases, we need to shallow those up or replace them with some other type of a management practice to deal with the water. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make
Okay.
sense. Thanks for explaining that. And so that monitoring will be ongoing, and the corrections will be ongoing.
Correct. Yep.
And then I am curious about coordination with the cities. Now, do all of the cities have permits for stormwater as well?
Most of them do, yeah. We have a lot of phase 2. Clark County is the only phase 1 locally permittee, but we do have several phase 2s, City of Vancouver, Camas, Washougal, Battleground, and they all do have requirements as well. They're not quite as robust as what the county does as a phase 1, but they certainly have those maintenance and operational requirements, yes.
Are they on the same cycle as far as renewal?
They are.
Oh, so
Yep.
that's going on now with all of the cities. And then just finally, I wonder your prioritization process for figure, because I think there's a lot of work and need out there. And how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a couple ways. We serendipitously discover some projects through our ongoing other programmatic elements. Folks out in the maintenance world will find things that are like, hey, we need to mess with this. People will call in. Members of the public will notice things at the stormwater facility, near their home or in their neighborhood, and those types of things are typically ones that'll get onto the repair list. And then for our non-repair projects, we're typically getting those through those sub-basin planning exercises that we've done, kind of focused in Lower Salmon Creek. And right now, like probably the last 5 years, we've been focused down in Lower Salmon Creek, partly because of, or primarily because of the level of development in those areas and the fact that so much of the stormwater infrastructure is outdated or absent. And because of the importance of Salmon Creek and that lower ecosystem as we look at salmon recovery and things like that. So we can get a lot of bang for the buck in those areas by going in and putting in treatment facilities where we have very high traffic roadways like Highway 99, 99th Street, Hazeldale Avenue, some of those. And so we've focused in that area intentionally in recent years to try to catch up a little bit and give a boost to that area.
And are those sub-basin plans online? Can people take a look at those?
They're not. We have, yeah, we've had those kind of internally, but they could be made available if folks are interested. Yeah.
Thanks so much for answering all my questions
You
and all
bet.
this work. I appreciate it.
Thanks for asking.
So, can anyone hear me?
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Okay. Other questions focused on the presentation?
Yeah, Chair, I've got a couple.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Great. I would just like to, you know, ask a couple more questions. So, Philbrook, how old is that system?
Not very. It was constructed in 2017, I believe.
Okay.
16 or 17. Yeah.
And this, you don't need to answer this because this is probably really under community development, but I would really like to, on a system that's built by private industry that we adopt in a situation like this, I would like to understand a little bit more about what the controls are. We call this a repair, but is it really a repair or was it a design flaw? Are you aware of that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a little nuanced.
Maybe
Counselor.
not
Yeah.
answerable at this point.
Yeah, I will
yeah,
say
so-
though that I will say that we are just entering into under our stormwater permit, we have a requirement to update the stormwater manual for Clark County. That process has just kicked off, and over the next year or two, we'll be working on that. And one of the things that we're looking at, or the technical team is looking at, are any tweaks to kind of the pre-testing or the design requirements that go into those type of facilities, with an eye towards making sure that all those I's are being dotted and T's crossed. Not so much that things wouldn't have been done by the book, but that the book didn't necessarily contemplate certain things. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things, again, you don't need to answer this, that I'd be curious about is like, some sort of a time period where I don't know how we would do that, some sort of a time period that's guaranteed. We just want to make sure when we're inheriting these systems that we're not inheriting a big problem, future problem. So that's enough of that. I appreciate it. I know it's been a sore spot for the community that lived there. But hopefully we can learn from it and improve processes to where we can avoid things like this in the future. Then my other question was, by the time this plan comes to us, it's pretty much fully baked. And I think that's good because I don't think any of us here are professionals on stormwater or clean water for that matter. We all have a little bit of knowledge to varying in degree. But my question was, I'd like to know how the Clean Water Commission is involved in this. Are they involved in some of the decisions or are they more or less just briefed as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, Counselor. And it's the latter at this point. It's something that I'd like to kind of delve into a little bit more going forward. So at this point, yeah, it is more of an informational discussion with the Clean Water Commission, much as it is with council as we go through the process of finalizing this plan. Going forward, we are hoping to kind of bring the capital planning or the capital plan development schedule forward in the year a little bit, so that instead of kind of doing it towards the end of the year like this, we'd still come for adoption at this time of year, but I'd like to see us move to having those discussions a little earlier in the year, leaving more opportunity for feedback and incorporation of some of the priorities or brainstorms that both Clean Water Commission and Council may have. I also see an opportunity going forward if we get back into a 20-year planning process, which we've never had in the stormwater world. That process to me, I think would be a great opportunity for long-term kind of vision input from Clean Water Commission, other members of the public, as well as council. So we'd be looking forward to that. And I think that opportunity might be a little greater. So much of what we do in these 6-year capital plans is aimed at permit requirements and all of those types of things that there's really usually not a lot of wiggle room and not a lot of discussion to be had about which projects we're going to do. So hoping to expand that a little bit. Hope that helps.
Yeah, that does. I really appreciate that. I'm really grateful for the people that volunteer their time, and I want them to be as effective as possible. And they're the touch into the community, and to where priorities lie when it comes to preference and locations and things. When you have some of these decisions are made very simply because they're a matter of immediate need, things like that. But when you only have so many resources and you can invest them here and there, that's where I really value having our boards and commissions and the recommendations, and the more involvement that we can give them in the decision-making process, I feel the better. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. I appreciate the thoughts. Agree with you.
So if I'm still audible, okay, thumbs up. So I'm gonna hark on some of the issues I've mentioned before, and I'm really focusing on what I would call the tactical, where, driveways cross our county ditches, where there should be some priority in our watershed on those locations where our roads cross our fish-bearing streams, or driveways cross what should be culverts or county ditches near body of water like Lacamas or Lake River. Where is the connection between county code enforcement, clean water, and where people, for instance, have just simply paved over their ditch without putting in a culvert, without using a permit? I know we'll start to get into very high numbers, just as with our poor ramps and sidewalks and curbs for public works. But where is the connection? Do we have priorities, within 200 feet of a fish-bearing stream? Are we taking a look at what individual property owners have done that may alter stormwater runoff, that may be killing our fish, putting sediment in, or putting nutrients into our watershed?
Yeah, Chair, that's a great question or set of questions. Just to kind of briefly touch on a couple pieces, there's no strictly prioritization that we do as far as our maintenance work on the ditch system, and that is much more the maintenance side of our operation, not so much the capital. But our maintenance folks out at the Road Ops Center, they do work on keeping the ditches flowing and making sure that those pinch points that, where someone may have a culvert issue under their driveway are taken care of. Some of that is done programmatically. Some of it is done on a complaint-driven basis when things happen at this point. When it comes to potential contamination entering our system, because the ditches are part of the separate storm sewer system out there, the public road ditches. So when runoff comes into those ditches, it is part of our MS4, and we do need to deal with those things. Probably the most.
So Jeff, let me focus on that. So
Yeah.
does Public Works do that maintenance? So for instance, I have personally seen where they've been cleaning out those ditches with a backhoe and coming across a pipe that someone would put in on their own without a permit and just working around it, or digging a ditch up into a pavement for a personal driveway with no culvert. What is the connection? Does someone, do your staff, does Public Works, whoever's doing the maintenance, have an obligation to say, hey, there's a code enforcement issue here. This ditch is now blocked, or we have drainage that was created that wasn't approved by the county. What action's been taken? I mean, what is happening?
That's great. And it's different case to case, but we do have folks within Clean Water, our source control specialists and people like that, who will investigate when there is a report of some sort of an issue, whether that's a discharge that someone notices. That can be a member of the public, could be a member of our maintenance staff who notice something happening. And then, yes, we certainly are coordinating with people like public health and people like ecology, as well as our own internal staff in code enforcement if needed, as well as our folks in clean water. So there is there is that feedback loop and that coordination. It is a little tricky because a lot of that stuff is initiated by a public complaint or those types of things. And so, you know, it's always a matter of trying to get our hands around what the issue is and then trying to work with the right people to fix it. A challenge. I totally hear where you're coming from. And the other piece is that one of our best ways of telling where there's at least ongoing issues as far as water quality, say within 200 feet of a stream, or somebody's got something going on in a ditch close to the water. We do have our illicit discharge detection and elimination program. So we have staff who are annually going out and looking at those discharge points from the ditches, looking for active sources of illicit water coming in or unclean water coming in, or any kind of evidence that there's been an issue in the past. And then we do also bring those forward if we find an issue to some of those same team members to look for solutions. So,
Okay. So I would
yeah.
just, my observation
Yep.
is, you know, I've heard all this before. I'd almost be interested. It's your business, but I'd be interested in seeing examples of where you've actually taken action. Because I've seen code enforcement just not doing it. You know, horses, manure dumped in wet areas, and no remedial action. Let me switch gears a little bit and go to kind of what Glenn pointed out. You know, we have a number of citizen scientists for years working on Lacamas Lake, doing their own testing. Obviously, they're not certified by ecology or by the state, but they have come up with pretty hard data that within Camas, there's a failed stormwater system that's actually injecting nutrient-laden water into Lacamas Lake, contributing to the algae blooms. There's a lawsuit, I understand, I think it's still pending, brought by citizens in federal court. Did we ever consider being a friend of the court and joining in that lawsuit? Because our stormwater permit, overall county permit, is impacted by individual failed stormwater systems, even within a city's jurisdiction. Was there any discussion with the PA? Because I know it never came to council, but I'm just curious if you ever thought of weighing in and being a friend of court in that action.
Yeah, that's a good question, Chair. I don't know the answer. I don't think that we have, and we've got Christine here from the legal side of things. I don't know that I've heard of any action like that taken or discussion. And I don't know if Devin has any thoughts.
I no longer work with clean water, so I would not know what discussions have been held regarding such an action. However, I can say that to my knowledge, there haven't been any.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, I mean, I've spoken with you, Jeff, over the years. Where's our leverage in talking to the city to do their bit to make sure our overall storm water permit is intact and protected? There's just the message I'm trying to deliver is there is so much more in the area of environmental compliance that we need to do. And likewise with environmental education for fertilizer use across the board from residences to agriculture. There's just so much more our conservation district should and could be doing. I know they don't get into enforcement, but where is the enforcement arm? I've talked to ecology about it, and there's little local enforcement by them or the Attorney General's office. I'm not looking to put people in jail or civil fines, and I'm looking for education and compliance. And I think there's just so much more the county at the local level could and should be doing. Any other questions? Concluding comments by Devin, we haven't heard much from you. Are you presenting today?
For the record, my name is, can you hear me?
One more click. There you go. It should be off.
For the record, my name is Devin Rostfer, Clean Water Division Manager. I wasn't planning on presenting today because you guys have heard so much from me, and Jeff has a great handle on our capital program. I just came up here if he needed any support in answering questions. So I don't have any prepared comments, but I just want to thank you again for your time today.
Yeah. And so hopefully we'll get to the Court of Appeals and get the issue resolved with the Growth Management Board and whether they overreached and created their own law or whether we need to react and comply with their decision so we can be on a good footing for low-cost loans and grants. Unfortunately, it's been dragging and dragging and dragging on at the courts. Hopefully, we'll get that answer soon. Any other comments or questions by council before we move on to the next work session? Thank you so much for all you're doing, Jeff. It's very complicated, and I'm hoping we have positive votes on the stormwater rates on the upcoming session. Thank you so much for all that you've been doing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Council.